So I'm delighted to introduce this panel to you. We have Charlotte, who's CNS. A big shout out to Charlotte. She made an extraordinary effort through the weather to get to us today, involving borrowing her mum's car. So thank you, Charlotte. We have Sandra, who's going to talk to us from the patient perspective, and also Will from the patient perspective. And I'm just going to take a moment, if you'll bear with me. Will couldn't be here last year because of his health. Will has recently stepped down as the chair of WMUK and made a huge contribution to the organisation, taking it through the few years that he did. So now you're in the room, we can formally say thank you for that, Will. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to you now, Will, actually, to start the introductions. We have one microphone, so this will be making its way along.
Okay, so... yes, Will Franks. I was diagnosed in 2012 and went into treatment pretty much straight away, and that is into chemo, which actually worked extremely well for me. And 10 years later on, I'm still in remission. Although, like all of us, we collect a collection of symptoms and side effects of the drugs, the chemo drugs, like diabetes is one. I have cryoglobulinemia. I have numb legs, I have all sorts of things. But part of it for me is mentally how I handle it, and we'll get onto that shortly. So that's me.
Thank you. So yes, I'm Sandra, and I was diagnosed in 2010. I didn't go straight into treatment. I had 6 years of watch and wait, or active monitoring as it is now. Then I did some standard chemo, which worked reasonably well, but only lasted for about a year. So since then, I've had 2 years on ibrutinib, which worked really well, but developed some side effects from the drug. So I'm now lucky enough to be on the LOXO 305 trial. So that's the drug pirtobrutinib, which is a second-generation BTK inhibitor. So along the way, have been through a broad range of symptoms, I'd say, from WM.
So I'm Charlotte Bloodworth. I qualified as a nurse in 1995 and moved into haematology by chance. When I moved to Cardiff, started off on the haematology ward, did transplant units, day unit, and then eventually became a special clinical nurse specialist in lymphoma. And that's where I've stayed. I've just developed over the years. And I'm now an advanced nurse practitioner in lymphoma. And in Cardiff, WM comes under the lymphoma service rather than the myeloma service, which it does in some other areas. So I'm just here really to sort of give you some insight into the experience of looking after people over the years, and I've definitely seen a lot of changes over the sort of 20 years that I've worked in haematology. So welcome.
Okay, thank you. Safe to say there are no silly questions today. You have some great expertise and experience here to draw on. So should we fire away with some questions? Kat, shall we start with someone that have come in online?
Yeah, so I've got one from Christopher here that's come in online, which is what type of voluntary lifestyle changes can assist with the well-being for those with WM? So I think in terms of this is sort of like in terms of those symptom management.
Okay, well, what I found, I actually, for a time, didn't work, and I found that my paraproteins, IgMs, were nice and stable for many years. And then I went and worked as the chief exec of a high-pressure tech company, and it went up and up and up. And when I stopped, it went flat again. So I find the lifestyle of as least stress as possible and as much sleep as possible as being the most effective.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that. I also think just trying to live as healthily as possible. So good, healthy eating, a bit of exercise, whatever you can manage to do, and there's something for everyone. Also, I'm a great believer in living in a fairly mindful way, which it very simply is just about living in the moment and not thinking too hard about what's gone before, not stressing too much about what might come in the future, but really focusing on what I can do now, eating well, alcohol very occasionally, and a bit of exercise when I can. Yeah, that's really what I live by.
So I suppose from the sort of nurse's perspective, I'd say initially active monitoring wasn't very active. It definitely has taken on a different perspective now, and active monitoring really is a sort of a time, a sort of a prehab time. So the advice that we sort of give in clinics is think of it as a time to get yourself as healthy as possible, stay as healthy as possible, so that all treatment options are open. Because a lot of treatment options aren't there if you are very unhealthy, have a bad heart, let yourself go a bit. So the more you can do to keep your body healthy is a good thing to do. And I think the diagnosis can maybe bring a new perspective on life, really, and realise that, you're not going to live forever. Your body is fragile. You do need to look after it.
Something I would ask, actually, and comes up a lot in the conversations we have around symptoms, is how do I know if that's related to my WM or not? And I guess with the symptoms that you've had, can you tell us a little bit more about the path you went down to go, oh, actually, it's this, and, it's recognised, and I might need some treatment around it?
I think certainly when I was first diagnosed, my assumption was that every symptom was WM. And I think you need to develop a good relationship with your CNS, and people like Charlotte are so helpful for us because I'm treated in Oxford. I have great access to clinical nurse specialists, so I can email them, I can ring them if I'm worried. But I think because I've had it for 13 years, I've learnt that I need not panic, that it might be related to WM, but there's not necessarily reason to, leap into the consulting room and get into treatment again. But being able to just talk it through with somebody is really helpful to get some perspective. And, if you've got a partner, they might have recognised some sort of change or some additional symptoms. So just talking it through, but not panicking with every symptom that you get, because as well as WM, we are liable to get any other, illness along the way. But talk to your team, and hopefully they'll be able to reassure you. But if it is a symptom related to WM, then they can take you down the right path.
Some of the symptoms I suffered with for years was cold, and particularly when it got really cold, it's like Raynaud's disease. And with that came fatigue, and it could be months and months and months on end, particularly over winter months. And so I discussed it with Shirley extensively over a period of time when I'd moved to Shirley. And it was macroglobulinaemia, and so what I go through now, and it was clearly, although originally I didn't know what all this cold, why I was getting so cold, was it WM related or was it not? So it just took a time to work through, was it or was it not, and if it was, what was it, macroglobulinaemia, and how do you treat it? And so personally I have plasma exchanges every month through the winter months at the moment to help with that. I think it's a very difficult one. When things come up, we don't know what they're related to, and I think it's quite mentally it's a very difficult thing of that uncertainty and living with it. So the best you can do, as was said, you talk to other people, you talk to the experts, and in time you will work it out and find out how best to manage it.
Thank you. Anyone have a question in the room, or shall we go back? Oh, we do. There you go, Oliver. They're always at the back.
Hiya. 2 questions, really. To share or not to share? You know, when you meet other people, do you share that you've got your diagnosis? And I've forgotten the other one. There you go, memory loss.
Well, we'll answer the first one, and then you think if you can remember the second one.
I have no question about that. A couple of months ago, I went to an event and started talking to somebody I'd never spoken to before. And I just shared it openly. I said, "Oh yes, I've got a WM." So I'm not. I said, "I don't work now. I don't like to say retired. I'm on a sabbatical, probably for the rest of my life." And he said, "You know, so have I." And he said, "I've got lymphoma. How do you handle it?" And he had only recently been diagnosed and treated. And he said, "Can I buy you lunch? And we'd go and sit down and talk about it." So we did. And hopefully I helped him. But absolutely, I'm open about it.
I think it's a really personal decision, and we're all different, and we all handle it differently. I probably struggled talking about it early on. I didn't share it too much. Now, 13 years down the line, I don't mind who I tell. Could even be the supermarket checkout girl. It just really doesn't matter. If it seems appropriate to the conversation, I'll say it. So, yeah, it just depends what you feel comfortable with. But as Will said, you know, it can be really beneficial to share. So you can, you know, find somebody that you can really connect with. And it can be helpful for both of you. So, yeah, a really personal decision. But I found generally sharing is good.
Yeah. Sorry, I do remember it now. It's about how people seem to look at blood cancers. Do you find it hard when you say to someone like, "My wife's had treatment," and then her mother says, "Oh, you're over it now"?
I think there is that assumption that if you have treatment for the WM, that people could think, well, you're good to go now, you've had your treatment, you must feel better. The reality is that whilst you might feel better, it hasn't gone. And from an emotional side of things, it can be really tricky. There's no easy answer. And I don't think there's a set phrase, but I think it's good to come up with something that if someone says to you, and sometimes they say things like, "Well, you look all right, so you must be okay." It's a really hard one, and you have to think about the relationship you have with the person that's saying it as to what your reply might be. I don't know. Do you have a stock answer for things like that, Will?
I do often say to people that every cancer, that they're not born equally and they can be very different. And I think there's the flip side of it, which is people who hear the C word and get a terrible look on the face and can't even say anything because they're so horrified by it. So sometimes it needs a bit of explanation as to what it actually means for people. What does it mean if it's incurable? What different types are there? And we're all going to be touched by it one way or another. I don't mean we'll get it, but we all get touched by it one way or another. And generally, I find people get some degree of understanding. I think until you've really been through it as both a carer and a patient, I think it's quite difficult to really understand what the journey is all about.
Shirley?
I just wanted to make a comment about if you're not willing or ready to tell people, if you keep a journal and write down things that are going through your mind, I think it can offer release of that information. It can be a way of offloading, and yet you have it's a private thing, but that's another way of perhaps doing something about it.
Thank you, Shirley. Oliver, there were some other questions at the back, some other hands up.
Is there a hand up here?
Hi, can I ask you, did your symptoms
creep up on you, or was there a Monday to Tuesday step change? And did you have enough information to sort of know what to look out for and understand about the symptoms? And if so, where did you get that information from? Dr. Google or your clinical clinicians?
That's a really good question. I have to say, before I was first diagnosed, the symptoms had started many years before, and I'd been to my GP for many, many years and said, "I'm getting night sweats, and I'm struggling for breath at times," and all these symptoms added together, and my GP didn't put them together. So sometimes you can live with it for years and years. And sometimes that's very difficult on people around you, because they just see you complaining about things. You don't have a label, you kind of eventually it comes a point when you do have to, something has to be done about it. And I think, as I say, sometimes it's very difficult to attribute them to a particular thing, because we don't know. I'd never heard of Waldenstrom's macroglobulinaemia, let alone pronounce it beforehand. And so I think it is something which everybody has a unique experience going through. And the more we have a community here that we can share and be there for people, and not just WM UK, but the whole of our community, then the more that we can catch those people at an earlier stage and help them when they get an earlier diagnosis.
I think in terms of did I have enough information, probably not. I don't think I ever would have done, but I certainly felt well supported by my team. My symptoms came on fairly gradually. I knew that I was heading towards treatment. The tricky point is knowing when that might be, and nobody can tell you that. We all do it slightly differently. So I think it's a tricky time when you have symptoms and you know that at some point you're going to need treatment, but you don't know when it might be and what it might be and how you might be at the end of it. There is a huge amount of information from WM UK. But I'd also say talk to your team at the hospital. They know you well. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, my only thing, a lot of this is the mental anguish that comes with it all, because it's all uncertainty. And I would say everybody is so different. So again, from my perspective, it's really difficult to prepare people when they may not be having treatment for years. You don't want to start talking treatments early because then you frighten people. But some people do want to do that. So it's just everybody is so different. So it's really interesting to hear all the different stories that are coming up.
Morning, everyone. Tuesday, I went for my 8th COVID jab. And as usual, I booked the last one available in the day, went straight home, went straight to bed for 2 days. Is it just me, or is this a regular problem for the WMers? Incidentally, my wife, who's obviously a lot harder than me, was fine.
Just my experience of all my COVID jabs is that, and I think I've had the same one all the way through, so I can't attribute it to one brand of vaccine to another, is that I've had a temperature for 48 hours and felt pretty fluey and haven't been able to do very much. But it has just been 48 hours and then I've been able to move on with no further problems.
So I was in our low-grade lymphoma clinic Thursday, and everybody, I was asking everyone whether they had their latest COVID vaccination, and I'd say almost everybody but one person had some sort of reaction to the COVID vaccine. But to me, that's quite a positive thing, because it means their immune system is trying to do something. So I just told everybody, oh, fantastic, good. It looks as though the COVID vaccine is going to work for you.
But when I actually had COVID, it wasn't as bad as the vaccine.
Don't be saying that. We're still encouraging the vaccination. Still the best protection, the vaccination.
Can I just say something about COVID? Is that I got COVID March 2020, so right at the beginning, before the vaccines, and was really poorly and was in the hospital for 5 weeks. And so as much as I might get symptoms from the vaccine, I would absolutely advocate everybody having the vaccine, personally.
Yeah, so I had a COVID vaccine a couple of weeks ago, and about 24 hours. But what is great about it is I know it's doing me good, protecting me, and it's a known period of time, 24 hours. I'm quite happy to sacrifice that. I don't mind that. Compared to some of the other symptoms like chronic fatigue, it's a known quantity.
Sorry, just quickly on that. I was just going to... God, sorry, I'm really loud. I think also you don't always know how COVID might affect you, because I had COVID in December. It was before I was diagnosed. But I'm pretty certain that it probably escalated my paraprotein. I mean, I might be wrong because I hadn't had any tests at the time, but I had some symptoms in about February, March. So I think you don't always know how it affects you. But I had my vaccine this year, obviously, a couple of days ago, and didn't really affect me. So, anyway, yeah.
Thank you. Oliver, Orlando's here with a question.
Thank you. I wanted to know, what are you guys as patients, what are you guys looking forward to from a sort of, is it, would like to see more trials or would like to see more what are you looking forward to as patients in terms of the next frontier to be able to live better quality of lives with WM?
A cure.
Outside of a cure.
I'm sorry, that may make business more difficult for you. But ultimately, treatments which have less impact on us are really what we're looking for. Because there's one thing saying, OK, I'm going to go and have chemo for 6 months, and then I can go and live for another 5-10 years. The reality is it's not that simple. And we do pick up. As I say, I've got diabetes. I'm on insulin now from the steroid drugs and a whole load of other things. Peripheral neuropathy I've had for 10 years, and those things. If you can just dial back the impact of this, I'm very happy to take a pill every day for the rest of my life, as long as I don't have to go through some of these punishing treatments, these archaic treatments. Some of them are, to give us a better quality of life, live long, healthier.
I think for me, on my wish list would be a drug. So I'm on a BTK inhibitor, so I take a tablet every day, and it's working really well. But I'd quite like a break from it, I think. I've done 2.5 years. So the idea that there might be a drug in the future that we could take for a bit and then have a pause from, that for me would be brilliant. I think I struggled a lot with the standard chemo. I had a lot of reactions to the rituximab. So anything that keeps me away from that is good in my eyes. But yeah, a drug that we could take for a bit and then have a pause from would be brilliant.
Kat, I'm conscious that we include the audience at home as well, so I'll take a couple of questions from there and then come back to you.
I've got one here that's relating to treatment, and someone asking whether chemo brain is a temporary or permanent problem. Have you found?
I can't remember. So long ago. I don't think it, personally for me, I don't think it was permanent, but certainly was definitely the case for a couple of years after chemo. But it took a while to recover.
Yeah, I mean, it's very real. I don't think it was permanent. I think we were talking earlier, weren't we? You can blame all sorts of things, age, COVID, all sorts. But yeah, I don't think it was permanent.
So I've got another one here from Patrick, and I think it relates a little bit to what you were talking about at the start. He's found it difficult to get an overview of symptoms that might be related to his WM because he's got other problems. So any ideas of how he might find sort of an overview of WM symptoms to help him?
Well, wait for our new booklet. I mean, I would say that it's looking and talking and connecting, and there isn't one simple answer, but there's a website, there's access to experts, and, you know, in many of our support groups and on our Facebook page, people share their experiences. Sorry, this sounds like it's on a lag. We know it's a frustration. We know it's not just here you go, there's the answer. But what we're trying to do is join as many dots for you as possible so you can find lots of different sources of information and pull that together for yourself. Yeah. Should we go back to the gentleman behind? Oliver had a question.
Thank you. One for Sandra. You mentioned that you're on pirabrutinib. Now, that works in a different mechanism to the previous generation of BTK inhibitors. Has the clinical trial reported on any output from the trial at all? Are you aware of sort of the results? You say that, you know, you're having a good experience on it. Just wondered if there had been sort of more general reporting of that trial.
I think I might defer to the front row here, who may have some better knowledge than me.
Yes, it has reported, but it is continuing to accrue new patients, and they're also expanding the trial. So the first trial was just looking in any B-cell malignancy. So it included WM patients, but also included other patients with other B-cell malignancies. And now, as it's seen that it's been successful, they've expanded to trials specifically in WM patients. The short answer is, as Sandra's experienced, a lot of patients respond to it, and most patients will respond. What we need to find out from an efficacy side of things is how long that response is going to last for. Because it does seem like with ibrutinib, like with zanubrutinib, these are amazing drugs, but the response isn't going to last forever. For some patients, it'll be many years, but for some patients, it might be shorter. And the other thing, and it goes back to what Will was saying, it's about kind treatments as well. So whenever trials are reporting, it's not just about their efficacy and how effective it is, but it's also, as MJ said, the tolerability, which we call it, and the side effect profile. And, you know, pirtobrutinib does seem to have fewer side effects than perhaps we've experienced with ibrutinib, or you've all experienced, I should say, with ibrutinib that I hear about. But yes, so it's effective for a lot of patients, but not necessarily forever. So we do need to be thinking about next drugs after that.
Thank you. Any more questions in the room?
You mentioned a website for symptoms, looking at symptoms. Where would I find the website? That was
just on our website. So if you go to the WM UK one, there's quite a large section there on symptoms, and Kat is just in the process of overseeing. We're doing a much more comprehensive booklet on it, which has a full overview, which I think was one of the original question that was asked. So again, everything that we're producing is in response to what you're telling us you need. So that should... When will the treatment symptom booklet out, Kat? Is that... Okay, so it should be out before Christmas, and we will let everybody know when that's out. It'll be available to download on the website, and we can also send hard copies out.
Okay. Has anyone experienced remission without having had treatment? Because some years ago, that is exactly what happened to me. And my IgM dropped from almost at the verge of needing treatment to 7. And I'm told they're now researching why that happens sometimes to people with lymphomas, that it might have been caused by trauma. And I certainly had trauma at the time because I had a knee replacement that didn't quite work, and therefore I have still pain from that knee. And they think in some way that boosted the immune system to fight against the paraprotein.
I'll just have a try to answer that. So I would say we definitely have people who have sort of waxing and waning type of WM. I've never seen WM go altogether, but definitely sort of plateau. You can have peaks and then plateau for years again. I don't know if maybe Shirley Tassau's got some better answers.
I don't know if I have that much insight into it, but I think it's important to remember that the immune system is really hyper-complicated, and we have a very minimal understanding of it, despite our best efforts. And WM is essentially an immune dysfunction disease. So, as I mentioned earlier, for example, when we get vaccinations, it ups the ante on the immune activity. And I think when that happens and the dust settles, things can come back looking a little bit different. Personally, I never rule anything out in WM. I think, I've seen some patients who've not had treatment and have settled down, and I literally cannot explain it. And others who've had something that I'm not aware of having any efficacy, and they've settled down. So I wouldn't put it past the immune system to shake things up and things to meander downwards, but it's not something that commonly happens, but it's good for us to record such experiences.
As Shirley has said, there are triggers that we just don't know about, and people will often hypothesize about infectious triggers that activates the immune system. But it's interesting that you said about the trauma. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case for everyone, but other people have made the same hypothesis, both, patients in our clinic, but also when we go to the big haematology conferences around the world. There was one group that looked at lymphomas in general in people that worked in the armed forces in the US, and that there was a slightly higher rate, and they hypothesized that it was possibly because of the trauma that they were experiencing. So I think it just goes back to the fact that we don't know ultimately what triggers and what causes WM, and we can have these hypotheses, and they may be true, but we just don't know yet.
I was just going to go on from that, because it is more about not only about treatments and the physical things. A lot of it is mental as well. So I didn't know if Will and Sandra could give me their top tips on how to get your mind in the right place.
Thank you. I think it's a really difficult one. For me, doing active monitoring was really tricky to get my head around. I did it for 6 years, and I did find it really stressful. I thought that every time I went for my appointment, this would be it. This would be the time when they said, yes, things have changed, you need treatment, and you need it straight away. The reality is with WM is it's much more slow and gradual, and I certainly was probably aware myself that I needed some treatment, as much as hearing it from the team. But I've just had to learn. I've had 13 years of living with WM, and I'm probably much calmer about it now than I was. I've learnt to accept that it's a very slow disease. Things change very slowly. The reality is that, as the front row was saying, that the drug that I'm on at some point is probably going to stop working. And I think the important thing is acceptance with the WM pathway. It's accepting that you have this disease, that there are going to be peaks and troughs. There are going to be times when life is going to be tricky and it's hard to see your way out of it. It is. There's no getting around that. But I have learnt over time that I do come out of it the other side. But as I said earlier, being mindful, trying to just focus on living in the moment, trying not to think too hard about what's around the corner, or feeling stressful about what I've been through, but really just accepting that in the here and now, I'm on treatment, I'm well, and I can do pretty much what I want to, barring the fatigue that comes along from time to time. But I think acceptance is the key thing to understanding that it's a disease that will sort of wax and wane, and there will be difficult times, but there will also be good times, and make the most of those times when you feel able to do things.
I would agree with everything you say. And just to add to that, I do find what I personally have done is look at what I can do and don't dwell on the things I can't do. So there are things like, I used to love going sailing, and I can't do that anymore. The cold gets me. So I learned to fly, and it's fabulous. Absolutely wonderful. It's a new world. And I love going abroad on holiday, but I can't go to anywhere cold. So where do I go? I go to South Africa when it's nice and warm in the summer there. It's winter here, and it's wonderful. So that's how I do it. I focus on the things which are positive, and those are the things which I can do with this wonderful life we've all been given, and put to one side those things which are those things I can't do, and just don't think about them.
Kat.
So I think we've got time for a few more questions because Amsterdam had a very long lunch queue. I think we'll have like another 5 minutes or so. So I've got a question here that's come in online from Peter, and he wants to ask, what is the one thing you would tell a newly diagnosed patient to help them deal with their diagnosis?
It's much easier for me, I think. My thing would be really that your healthcare team are there for you, and again that goes back to the CNS, having somebody that you know is there to answer questions at that point, because it really is a frightening unknown thing, and having somebody that can signpost to WMUK, can get your doctor quickly if you need to ask questions, get you into clinic. So I would say know who your CNS is and use them.
I think probably I'd say don't make assumptions. I think it's very easy for us to start thinking about what we think might happen and what could happen or what it might be like. Try not to make too many assumptions, but just simply to go with the here and now. And as Charlotte says, turn to your team, talk to them, and talk to as many people as you can.
The real change for me was connecting into this community. It was 10 years ago, but it was literally a lifesaver, connecting. So that's what I was saying. As soon as you're diagnosed, then if we can find WMUK didn't used to appear on the search pages to about page 3, and now we're there at the top. That was one of the things I banged the table about a lot. And plug it, and you find a community. That and a rapid escape from Swindon General Hospital to somewhere, people who really know what they're talking about. I shouldn't say that, but that was 10 years ago, yes.
Thank you. Kat, are we still doing questions, or are we filling in for Amsterdam's lunch queue?
We're just, okay. I would just do one more question.
And there's also a lady at the back, I think, as well, who has a question.
Have we got a lady at the back? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Hello. When I was first diagnosed, I was looking up all sorts of things and didn't even know about WMUK or anything, and looked to the general lymphoma site to start with. And I got a buddy through that. And I was this buddy, we spoke quite a lot of times until and I found that, you know, a really good thing, because you don't know them, but you know that they've gone through, even if it was not WM, but they've gone through experiences which you can talk about. And obviously we have our groups, but sometimes maybe it's a good idea to have somebody you can just talk to out of your group. But the groups are fantastic, and the Facebook is fantastic. And I think with the Facebook, it's very interesting to read how many different things are going on. People all have different things. Some people have a lot of problems. Some people have no problems. And it makes you feel that, you know, you are definitely part of a big family. So,
thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think at a human level, we all have a need for connection. I think when you then add in a cancer diagnosis and a rare disease, you need that even more. And that's what we try and enable people to do, is connect in the way that they want to, in the way they feel comfortable with, and they can dip in and out of that. But, you know, I would say to that newly diagnosed patient, there is a whole community here of people who are living with WM, who are more than ready and happy to share their experiences, hold your hand virtually when you need it doing, and share information. And, you know, as I said at the beginning, it's about being stronger together, but between us all, we're all there to support each other.